It's all the moving pieces. Welcome to another fabulous episode of My Orgasmic Life. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Gaia Morrissette, and today's episode is brought to you by Tickle.life. I have a delightfully juicy goddess that I got to meet when I was hosting Tickle.life's podcast. And we had such good chemistry between the two of us, laughter and playfulness, that I was like, you totally need to come on the show. So I'm going to let her introduce herself because I'm horrible with everybody's names and I don't want to pronounce it wrong. And tell us a little bit about like what you do in the world, and then we'll get into our conversation about, you know, asking for what we want sexually and our own journeys with that.
Sounds good. I was actually surprised you hadn't confirmed how to pronounce my name at the beginning of this, so this makes sense why. I am Yael R.Rosenstock Gonzalez, and I'm a sex educator, sex coach, and sex researcher. So I'm really excited to use research as an opportunity to get more information out into our communities. And part of that is because I really believe in the importance of identity and identity work and understanding how those things intertwine with the rest of our lives. And so my sex positivity work is entrenched in inclusion, representation, and identity.
Excellent. And yes, and that's why I never have to worry about pronunciation of anybody's names.
We just do it ourselves. I was like, that's courageous right there.
Okay, so let's get into, let's start with, so when I make the statement, asking for what we desire sexually, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
I think specifically like being verbal and vocal, because my big thing when I was growing up is that I would just let my body do the talking or my moans do the talking, and like learning to be like, this is what I want. Touch me here, lick me there, like make this happen. That's what I think of.
Nice. For me, that's exactly the same thing. I think of communicating very specifically, and for me, I think also too, it's like negotiation. Like it opens up, when I think of that statement, it opens up the possibilities of negotiating, not only what it is that I want and desire, but how can I manifest that into reality with whomever happens to be in front of me. And so that the sexiness and the juiciness of that conversation possibility, not necessarily while I'm in, it's like pre-sex conversation, you know, it's like pre-foreplay. It's like, for me, it's like, okay, if we can have that conversation before we get naked, before we're rolling around naked, then I don't necessarily have to go, my brain doesn't have to be as on to utilize my language skills. And I can really drop in, for me, I can really drop into the pleasure and the body piece of it, right? Where I get to be like really screaming and moaning and throwing things and scratching and biting and growling and all those pieces, so that I don't actually have to be like, oh, I got to wake that part of my brain up that says a little to the left and softer, please. Now, it's important to be able to do that.
Yes. And so I would say that like the part that I've apparently always been good at, and I didn't realize it. Like, for example, I am a spanky, and I didn't know that I told my partners this, right? Because I didn't know about this part of myself. I hadn't thought about it really, really intentionally or explicitly. And then when I went back and I was like, how did they all know? One of them's like, because you told me. And I was like, when did I tell you? I didn't have the vocabulary for it. And they were like, no, you told me. So I think like the pre-foreplay, I've always felt pretty confident about. But when it came down to like, maybe I did need something a little bit to the left, I'd pause, right? I would just like not moan as much and hope that they'd end up going left in the hopes of finding a deeper moan. You know, like that's just like, I'm guiding you, like, or I'll like scoot my body over to like get it there.
And it's really interesting, like that pause, like I know that in the act, like during in the act, I remember that there was plenty of times where I would want something. This is where I would pause. I would pause when I wanted something raunchy and something dirty, and I would be like craving it. And so I remember like just thinking it really, really, really hard, right?
Read my mind.
Read my mind, right? And I would maybe like do more screaming or more moaning or whatever, or like you said, scooch, or take their hand. This was another move before I could communicate the way that I can now. I would take their hand and put it on, say, my throat, or put it in my hair, or put it on my ass, being like, now you got the area, and do the thing. Do the thing that I like. I don't want to admit that I want you to choke me out. I don't want to admit that I want you to treat me like a dirty fucking whore. I don't want to admit all that shit. I can't admit that. But I can take your hand and I can put it there so you know that that's what I want. Needless to say, I didn't always get what I wanted.
You mean your partners weren't all mind readers? What?
They were not psychic.
And the thing is, like, I don't know about you. It's not that I was not having good sex. I was having great sex.
Yeah.
But like you said, right? I want this part of me touched, right? I want my ass touched. I want it squeezed. Like, and so it's going to be good because I like to have sex with people that I'm good at sex with, right? That's important to me. But it could be better if I could just get myself touched in the place I want in the moment that I want it. And that has been so exciting.
Yes. So hold on, let's go check over at our people. Our people.
Anyone else feeling this?
Anybody else? Let me see here. Why won't it let me do the thing? Oh, there we go. Okay. Now I see both our screens. All right. So I'm checking in with our peeps. Anybody have any comments, statements, questions? No? All right. I'll be back.
Maybe. Particularly guaranteed.
That's true. So let's talk about why there was a pause.
Mm-hmm.
So why was your pause? What was your pause?
So I think that I had this idea that I don't think is that common, that things should happen, quote unquote, naturally, that sexual chemistry should lead to the perfect touch at the perfect time. And the truth is, right, I was experiencing fairly much that. I was experiencing that people could understand my body, and I learned so much about myself through new partners because they open up new worlds to me. So I'm so lucky to experience a lot of that anyway. But I think that idea that if I ask, then I'm somehow putting them down, or I'm somehow insinuating that there's something wrong with what's going down, as opposed to me just being like, I want the best version of my sex to happen. And that was an important switch that I had to make. Like, there's nothing wrong. It's not that they're doing something that they shouldn't be or what have you. It's just, I get to say the things that I enjoy. And the thing is, my partners would. I don't think I've ever had partners who were like shy about like, touch me here, do this, like, right? They did it. For some reason, I was like, no, they should mind read me.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And that whole fear of criticism, taking it as a criticism, or a rejection, or the reaction. I know for me, and I know lots of other people, I mean, very, very common, right? Is that like, maybe I'll hurt their feelings. I mean, I remember growing up, and one of the really strong sex messages that I got was that men were really fragile. Their sexual ego was incredibly fragile. And that's the message that I grew up with, right? And so this idea that if I said, fuck me harder, fuck me softer, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, that the fear that they would internalize that as me saying that they're bad in bed. And then not only was that like the worst, and that was like the worst possible thing that I could destroy. It was like this whole thing that I was like this story that I was told that their egos were so so fragile that if I made one statement that their whole sexuality would be destroyed because I asked them to fuck me a little bit harder.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely had that same narrative going through my head. Protect the male ego.
Yeah. And the thing is like, and what I found, just like you, now don't get me wrong, there are lovers out there that are carrying some stuff and some trauma and some things around that might very much trigger those insecurities and those issues and things like that. But across the board, on average, I would say that most partners are really want to give you the best experience that you desire to have. So they actually become less stress, less pressure, less performance anxiety, less, all these things when they can trust that if you want it softer, you'll ask for it. If you want it to the left, you'll ask for it. If you want your hair pulled, you'll ask for it. If you want them to talk dirty and call you dirty names, you'll ask for it, so that they get to feel safe in the sexual experience and get to drop into being fully present, and then everybody gets what they need.
And I think also thinking about that in the reverse, right? So like, how do I feel when someone asks for something in particular? I'm always like, oh, thank God, I love direction. You know?
See, that's funny, because it's funny. I kind of feel a mixed emotions as depending on who my lover is, because I play in the realm of BDSM, and typically I'm pretty dominant. So it depending on the dynamic of the relationship. So if it's a more of a submissive lover that I'm with, and they don't asking is different, but it's when it's the demand piece. I'm like, oh, I don't think so. I'm alpha. No. It's not important. You're not important in this moment. How dare you try to top me from the bottom? Like, there's always some things that gotta go on, right? But if it was another lover who I had a different dynamic with, I'd be like, that's so fucking hot. Yeah, tell me what to do, right? Like, tell me what to do. That's so good, right?
Yeah, I'm normally in the dom sub space. I'm more subby. So I think that insofar as receiving orders, I feel quite comfortable with, as long as they're not things that bother me. I'm just like, oh yeah, please, like, tell me what you want. I want to make this pleasurable for you. But I am someone who is very me pleasure focused. And so I, as a more submissive person, will also now be very clear about the things that I am seeking.
Nice.
But I would also say there might be a gender part of it too. Like when I think about, so being with men, that fragile ego thing was definitely a concern, like that they might have that. And I feel like I haven't really had partners that I would identify that way. I just put that on them because of the narrative. Yeah. But then also, I think with women, I was just like, well, sex with women is supposed to be so much better than sex with men. And so if I am making suggestions or requesting things, then I am like not living or fulfilling this expectation that like women just know each other and therefore they're going to like, and so I think there I was also like, oh no, like this has to work miraculously and fireworky. Otherwise, like I am being bad at sex with women.
That's so fascinating, because mine's the opposite. Mine is the opposite of the fact that because women are complex, that it just made sense that we would have to ask each other. So when I had sex with women, it was like, so what do you want? What do you need? And like the whole time I'm like getting the feedback and the conversation and the curiosity and giving all of the feedback and all of that information back, because I went into having sex with women that we're complicated creatures and there's no way that we can figure each other out unless we communicate about what we want.
Okay, I agree. I actually do go in being like, what is it that you like? Like, what kind of pressure do you want to be penetrated at all? Like, all these different things. But I actually find that people have and I don't have like a huge number of examples, but people respond with like, I just do it, just like, we'll see, unless they have something they don't want. Like some people don't want to be penetrated, like, so don't. But otherwise, just like, just do it. I'm like, I just want some instruction. I just want some, like, I just want to know a little bit about what you like so that I'm doing something right. Although I wouldn't say I'm much better. I think that when the question would get flipped, I'd also be like, well, let's see what goes. I'll let you know. So I need to be better in that realm.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? That it's so like, this is a great conversation because it's really interesting in the whole what our narratives are when we go in and we're having sex with people, and what that beliefs and those stories that we are carrying and what those supposed to mean. When reality is that most of the time we've put that on that other person. They have no idea that there's even this story narrative thing that's happening.
Yeah, poor person.
Poor person. Like, what the fuck?
You got to deal with all the things I brought to you.
It's true. So what would you say is the turning point for you of being able to, okay, I didn't talk about, I almost got to escape from talking about why I paused. Another reason why I paused was because I didn't want to admit that I desired what I desired. And so there was this internal shame that I was carrying around being seen as a slut, being seen as a whore, being dirty, being a pervert, being a deviant, being predatory, like all of these things, all of these fears that I was carrying around my sexual desires, and especially those darker desires that I had. And those were the places where I really wanted to explore. Like, those are like those really dark places are where my orgasms are the best. But I couldn't actually talk or ask for those things. I was just hoping, like there was this hoping that they would figure it out. And then I didn't have to take responsibility. This was the secondary piece of it. If they figured it out, then if there was any backlash, it was their fault. It wasn't mine. I didn't have to take any responsibility in it. Zero. I'd be like, well, that was your idea. I didn't suggest that.
You should be more careful about the things that you do in bed.
Sorry, man.
No, but it's true. I think that makes sense. I think that my subconscious is very loud. And so while I also have held shames around the things that I enjoy and want to happen to me, I don't know if I'm blacking out or what, but I seem to be communicating those things just fine. I'm always like, how'd they know? How'd they figure it out? You know? And sometimes I'm not doing it the way that I want, which is where then I have to deal with that pause and that shame. But yeah, I'm always like, oh, they did it. You know, I guess we must have discussed this at some point.
So that's good that you get some breakthrough. Your subconscious has some serious breakthrough stuff going on.
It's like, you took years to get here. I've been here. I had no patience. I'm not a patient person, so I guess my subconscious isn't either. Was not waiting for that to go down well.
Okay, so what would you give as advice to move through that piece? Okay, so let's start with the narrative of like, not wanting to destroy anybody's ego or how they're going to be upset. Those pieces. So let's talk about, how did you work through that piece? Because that's a big narrative to be carrying.
Yeah. I feel like, so it's going to depend on how you also interpret yourself. And so, like I said, for me, I enjoyed the feedback of people telling what they wanted. There are times when you might feel, crap, I'm doing this wrong. And that's why someone is saying that. But there are other times where you're like, oh, they just want to feel this sensation. And so being able to like identify those things. When does it feel like you're being corrected in sex versus when does it feel like you're being encouraged to do something that will bring this person more pleasure in a way that wasn't at all a criticism? And if you're able to see that those can both exist, then I feel like it's easier for you to say, I can also provide that kind of feedback to others, right? The kind that doesn't make them feel like I'm correcting them. It just makes them feel like I really want this thing and I so desperately want you to be involved in this thing. And I always recommend this, like using a dirty talk-esque way to ask. So like it would drive, and I got this from a sex worker who works in Germany. She taught a dirty talk class at a sex workers conference. And it was just like, oh my God, it would drive me crazy if you touched me here. Like, I don't know if I could handle this if you touched me here, right? Like, and just making it sexy, making it something that someone is desperate to fulfill because they're desperate to have you feel those ways. And then even if you do have a fragile partner, which you probably don't, but even if you do, you've actually circumvented that issue altogether.
Well, that's a good one. It's a very good one.
She was a very good facilitator.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that, you know, which is, I'm going to actually start using that as in my repertoire. I like it. I typically don't. I'm kind of a, like, you know, for years, I would just basically, it's the dom part of me, right? That would just be like, give orders, right? Left, right, light, soft. Like, I only wanted to use one words because I didn't want to think about it too much, right? So I was just like, get her done, right? And then
go remote control.
Exactly, right? And most of my partners loved it because, and I didn't realize this before I before I dropped really into the kink world, right? That most of my partners up to that point was awesome because it was like, you're giving me feedback, you're telling me what you want, I don't have to guess. Like, it was like super awesome and sexy for them. And then my ex-husband, one day he's like, you know, you don't have to boss me around. You could maybe ask, like, instead of demanding things, maybe you should ask. He's like, it's kind of putting off. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like every lover I've ever had has never complained. And I remember like taking it personally a little bit, right? Yeah. And internalizing a little bit, like, what, you're telling me that I'm asking for what I want wrong? It's what I want. Do what I want. Which he kind of had a point. It was the expectation and the demand in my tone that was not an invitation. It was not actually asking. There was no asking in that moment. It was an order. And he was not wrong in that. It was an order. I expected that when I said it, it was going to happen.
It was happening.
It was happening. And so that I always remember that. So when depending on who I'm with, you know, because I have a harem, right? So depending on what lover I'm with, I'm like, okay, is this one that I get to order around, or is this one that I have to ask? And like, what energy, what language am I using, right? What's the energy behind it? Is it like, hey, this is an invitation, like kind of like you were saying, like, you know, it would drive me wild if blah, 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 right? You know, I'm like, oh, I really love it if you touch me here versus, hey, touch me here. I may not even say, hey, touch me here. I might be like, clit now.
I'm not a clit now kind of person, but I am like, and honestly, I want to work on this. I use like such anatomical language, but like, just like touch blank now. Like, but I ask for the things explicitly, but I think that for so many people that just sounds so scary, which is why I offer workarounds. Yeah. Like, I don't generally say it would drive me nuts if you did blank. I just tell you if it's driving me nuts, like, or if it's making me good. Like, if it's super intense, I just say it's super intense. But I do, in fact, like you, just make the statement. I think mine sounds less dommy, but it is, in fact, commands. Yeah. Yeah. Touch me blank is a command. That's just how that works.
Yeah, that is a command.
Or I'll say, I want you to touch me blank, right? In which case that is more of an invitation. But my expectation is that will be fulfilled, because it would be weird for you to be like, unless it's a power play thing where they're choosing not to do it yet. You know, that does happen.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's all those layers, right? It's like all of those pieces of like, how do we communicate it? How do we find the words? And then also, I think there's that piece around what words we use. Like, can we even use the words like nipple, breasts, cunt,
anus.
Pussy, anus, ass? Like, can we even say those words, right? And if we can't say those words, how can we ask for what it is and the way that we want those to be touched?
Yeah, I don't know if I can do this in English. I do this in Spanish. Like, the word anus does not sound like a fun word to be like, touch my anus. And it's not like any better in Spanish, but I feel better about it in Spanish.
What is it in Spanish?
I know.
Oh, well, it's a little softer.
It's cute.
Yeah, it's like, oh.
It's like a millennial.
Yeah.
It's like a millennial. Like, touch my anus. Like, it just doesn't have to say. Like, an ass is, like, I have a big ass. So if I just say ass, like, that is not specific enough. And all of my ass loves to be touched. It's just like the nerve endings across the board are great. But I need to be more specific sometimes. I want, it's the whole part that I'm asking for sometimes, not just the general fleshy area.
So, do you have a tip? Let's do a little teachable moment here, because I have a skill set that, and I think you probably have something to add in this, is that how do we become comfortable talking about words, actually? How do we become comfortable? Because in order for us to communicate efficiently, we need to be able to use language. So how can we, do you have any tips to get people acclimatized, normalize, comfortable with, using language, dirty talk?
I think it's practice. Like, when I work with babies, I use the correct talk that's not dirty, right? I use body parts so that while they grew up with the words, and so it's not a dirty word. But for adults who have been socialized that these aren't things that we say out loud, I just super unapologetically all the time in public am saying things like vulva and vagina and anus and like penis. And I use it as a modeling tool without any sort of unapologetically, unashamedly. So I ask people to just practice using the words, but also to identify what words work for you. Like, if there are things that you actually don't like the sound of, you don't need to use those in your vocabulary, in your sex life. Like, you can choose to opt out. I mean, not in a way that like, I refuse to talk about, but kind of choosing the vocabulary that makes, I love the JJ, for example. That is like one of my favorite ways to say vagina.
Yeah, and I think and one of the ways that I help and I teach my people, my peeps, is the fact that I have them create a slang vocabulary list for each thing. So we have for each body part, and we have for each sexual act, and then they go and they like find all the words and they put it on the list, and I have it like a group activity because everybody has fun with this. So then they go talk to their friends and like, hey, this is what my list is. Do you got any other words on that list? And so now it opens up the dialogue about language in a non-way that we would not normally, you usually
not in a sexual way.
Not in a sexual way, but we're having fun, and we're having fun with it. And then once we have our lists, and now you have your whole circle of friends who are all involved in this, and they're all very excited to contribute to this. Then you pick a slutty word of the day, as I like to call it, and you have to then incorporate that word as often in sentences throughout your day. So it normalizes it, right? Like, it completely normalizes. It's like you pick up the phone. So say, one of my favorite words is cunt, right? And so I'd be like, so, talking to your girlfriend, I'm like, so how's your cunt today? They're like, it's good. Thanks for asking.
You would really enjoy Southern Spain when they go outside and they're like, hey, how's it going? They're like, and I'm going to translate it. It's hey penis, hey vajayjay, hey vagina, like hey pussy. Like, that's how they say hi. Hi dick, hi pussy, basically. And so in other Spanish-speaking countries, it's common to say hi aunt, hi uncle, right? Like in other countries. But in Southern Spain and Cadiz, it's hi dick, hi pussy.
Nice.
So recommended location when you can travel again.
When I can travel again.
Pisha y shosho.
One of the things, let's talk about a piece around releasing shame, because I think that, we talked a little bit about that piece around shame and owning our sexual desires, because, so what tools, what tips do you have to, I mean, it's huge, right? So, but, just a little tip.
Yeah, and actually I've been doing like a series on Instagram of like different arousal and shame or pleasure and shame talks. I would say that one thing that is big for me and part of what I do is like helping folks find community. Because, for example, I'm as it sounds like you are, polyamorous. And I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that people could feel this way. I felt that way. I just thought I was a weirdo and that there was something wrong with me. And so when I found out that there was a word and I found out that there was a community, I felt validated. I felt normalized. I felt like I could be who I am. And so a big thing for me is just being able to start looking at what is it that you enjoy and start doing that research. And so I help facilitate people in that research if they need it, but finding the people who are like you so that you don't feel alone, because then it's harder to feel like a weirdo when there are other weirdos out there with you.
Yes, it's true.
Like
It's
redefining normal.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I would say the piece around firm believer that we need to come from a place of understanding where our shit comes from. So who gave us this belief system? And you know, and once we learn that, oh yeah, that's not actually mine, it makes it easier to release it and let go of it. So we don't have to hold on to this piece around that story of, you know, men's egos are fragile, or, you know, I'm a whore and being a whore is the worst thing possible because I want, and I'm a sexual being. Like, you know, where did those beliefs come from? Where did those stories start? Where did you first hear them? Where did you first internalize them? And once we know where they come from, we can give them back to the person that imposed them on us in the first place, and come back to this place around we're born healthy, complete sexual beings.
And it's chipped away.
It's chipped away.
Chipped away by others.
By others.
I think in particular what ended up being a pausing point for me was around BDSM and power play, and being able to recognize myself as someone who holds my values, and that not being in contradiction to me enjoying sexual submission, right? Like that was a huge story that I had to unravel, because there is a divide in feminist thought about whether or not this is a valid okay, or if people are literally undoing work that has been done. And so I like that practice. I would say that came after, though, for me, after finding community.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so what's one thing that you want to leave the audience with in this conversation before we talk about all the awesome things that you're doing in the world?
It's like cliche, but like your pleasure matters, your enjoying it matters, that everyone involved in the sexual interaction gets to matter, and you can take turns and just, you know, enjoy, have fun, be safe, and mentally, also physically, but mentally.
I love it. I would say that if you don't ask for what you need, you won't get it.
Oh yes, great returning to the topic. Very nice. You've done this before.
Not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't ask for what you want, you won't get what you need. The other piece of that too is that faking it, I need to say this. Faking it will set you up for a lifetime of shitty sex with that partner. Because there's no win. There's no win. They will think that they did what you wanted, and now they will continue to do that over and over and over again. And the only out is to be straight up and honest, and that's a really uncomfortable conversation to have. So yes.
I wrote an article about that.
I know. It's like, it's so much better. It's so much better.
Don't fake it.
Don't fake it, and just ask.
Today was your last faked orgasm, if you have faked an orgasm.
Exactly. Moving forward, ask for what you want. Okay. So, you wanted to say something. There was something that I felt like you got excited there for a moment.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I literally posted about this idea today, which is why it was on my mind. And so, similar to your reflective process was, if you are not asking for what you want, what is it that's keeping you? And so we shared what kept us from asking, and to really interrogate what is the thing that makes you pause. And then, you can unravel it like you were explaining.
Yeah. And give it back to wherever it came from, because you weren't born with it. It's not yours.
I like it. Not yours.
Not yours. Okay, so bye-bye. Off you go, back to your original owner. All right, so what are you doing in the world? And what's happening? What's going on? What's shaking? How people can have more of you?
So much going on, but I think what I'll focus on are the smaller pieces because they're less So if you follow me at Yael the Sex Geek, you'll see that pretty soon I'll be announcing some live webinar sessions around getting to know yourself for better sex, self, and compatibility. And so there'll be a free session on that. I'm doing one on polyamory and navigating it because folks have a lot of confusion around insecurities and jealousy and like, what does it mean? And how do you have these conversations? And what things might come up that you weren't expecting. I am also hoping to start soon a process of like really deep diving. So like a 3-month program of deep diving into the topics of self and sexuality. You can check out my book. It's a great way to start. And yeah, I do sex coaching, I do consulting and all that jazz. But mostly if you go to the Instagram, you'll find it, or you sign up for my mailing list. That's where I release all the podcasts and these free articles and the freebies that I create.
Beautiful. And I have all of that information, so that all that information will be in the show notes for everybody. And
sexpositiveyou.com.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So how can you guys spend more time with me? Oh, here are all the ways.
Let me count the ways.
So you can find me on social media under Gaia Morrissette. For all your BDSM needs, you can find me under Empress Gaia. For all your sexual wellness needs, come visit me at succulentliving.com. And I have tons and tons of self-study courses, guided courses. I have a epic library of education, exploration in all areas of relationships, sexuality, alternative lifestyles, you name it, it's there. And this fall, I'm super, super excited. This course just happened by itself. I'm in the works as we speak, as right now, figuring out all the details. But I've been having so much fun looking at, and if you've been watching my feed, you'll know what I'm talking about, looking at how fairy tales, romance novels, media has affected our beliefs around sexuality and relationships and love. And a lot of them are not really healthy for us and don't serve us and don't create the dream relationship or relationships that we might want to have in our lives that best serve us. So I'm diving in. We're going to dive deep into where do our beliefs come from, and let's send them back.
That's the theme. The theme is just send it back. Go back to where you came from.
It does not serve me. It's not serving me. So those are some of the ways. And of course, you know, my Orgasmic Life, listen to the podcast, listen to Tickle.life's podcast. And, you know, I just want to say, first of all, I love you all for taking the time to hang out with us today. Second of all, it's time to support the arts. So, you know, I have a Patreon. The show isn't free. It's now time to come support. As I gift all of my heart and soul to you guys, I need some support back, whether that's through, you know, Patreon, whether that's, you know, sending my links out, sharing testimonials. So let's make this relationship a give and take relationship, okay? You know, so it's more balanced and equal. It's mutually beneficial. So this is my new take. You know, the last couple shows I've been talking about this. So let's have a mutual beneficial relationship, people. All right. See you next time. Bye.